And that bigger problem is that the banks are in a panic about more and more deposits leaving. And when was it the decision of these banks to tell us what we could and what we couldn't do, or when we can and when we should or shouldn't move? They never say that about moving into to an S&P index fund or into a mutual fund or whatever it may be, and who gave them that authority. To me, it's very concerning. And those banks, if they're going to that length to make it that difficult to move your money, you ought to think about moving all of it immediately. We said, they spoke with my operations manager, who said to the bank, yeah, this is all legit, you can release the funds. And they said, well, we need to have it go through compliance. And the response back was, well, no, you don't. Why do you have to let it go through compliance? This is the client's wishes. Well, we have to make sure that it goes through compliance. But we have seen, we go back to the order that we did last year for $50 million. One of the two orders that we did of that size, it took the lady almost 5 days to get the money wired. And that's why she wanted us to tell the world about it, that, hey, it's one thing, it's very easy to write the bank a check for $50 million and have them take it gladly. It's another thing to get it out. And what we view as our money, remember, we're unsecured general creditors to the bank. What we view as our money and our ability to get it is becoming much more difficult as these banks struggle with the mass exodus of deposits leaving in search of yield and of safety. So yeah, I think it is becoming normal and will become much more normal as well. No, I think that they've actually created some departments or positions at these banks called client retention management, because they are losing clients, they are losing deposits. It's a mass exodus, and this is not going to change. But people need to remember that when these depositors leave, especially if we see large deposits leaving or many of them leaving, this is what got Silicon Valley Bank into trouble. Now, that was a bank run, but the premise is the same, that these banks are undercapitalized and over leveraged, and they're leveraged with what they thought was good assets, that being mortgage-backed securities and treasuries and muni bonds and all of these things that have lost 50 or 60% of their value. And if they aren't capitalized enough with money in-house in order to meet those deposits, they're forced to sell these assets at a loss, which really, really hurts them. So they're doing all they can to mitigate not only the speed in which the money gets out, but to take the bold step of pretending that there are parents or our guardians and looking out for our best interests. And my question is, at what point did any of these banks ever become that entity that we have asked for? They're looking over our shoulder to make sure, look, if the client comes in and says, I'm a big boy, I'm a big girl, this is what I want to do, I have verified the wire instructions, this is where I want the money to go, call the company says the address is right, and it still needs to go to compliance, there's something really wrong with this. And it isn't your money, it's their money, and they're making the determination when and how easily, and if at all, that money gets released. That to me is rather concerning, and probably the beginning of a trend as more of this happens. And heaven forbid we see a bail-in, which should have happened a long time ago. These banks should not have been bailed out. That's part of the Dodd-Frank Act. We see a bank get bailed in and watch craziness when people run to pull their money out, and watch what happens then. So yeah, I think this is something we're going to see a lot more of. Look, it's one thing for us to sit here and say, stock market's overvalued and over leveraged and risky. The real estate market, the bond market, it's one thing to espouse economic theory and talk about how it could affect your investments. It's another thing altogether to say, hey, by the way, the money in the bank, well, it's not safe. And if they fail, the fact that these banks were bailed in or gobbled up by JP Morgan or Bank of California, which, by the way, JP Morgan was on the back end of that. I have a very good friend who's one of the top analysts at JP Morgan. He said he spent all week on that PacWest Bank of California deal himself in New York City. So the point of it is that these banks that have fallen already have been gobbled up or consolidated by JP, or were bailed out by the FDIC, supposedly not at the cost or at the expense of the taxpayer, which is a bunch of malarkey. The bottom line is that they're supposed to be bailed in. That's what the Dodd-Frank law said. And when you see that happen, you will see, I believe, a massive amount of anxiety, unlike anything anyone's ever seen. And that's what we're seeing now. People are saying, look, I don't feel safe with my money in the bank. And so gold and silver represent, I think, something outside the system that carries no counterparty risk. And that's really what it's all about. It's not about becoming wealthy. It's about keeping your wealth and removing the counterparty risk and the systemic nature of the problem. So it's a different mindset primarily altogether. And I think you see an event like any of these regional banks failing and Janet says, no more bailout, no more consolidation, we're going to bail in. And people will understand what that means. It is law. The fact it hasn't happened yet is only delaying the inevitable, and that inevitable will be a panic where that M2 line will fall off a cliff. And I just think that we're not there yet, but that is the difference, is that people are focusing not on their investments as much as they are their savings, and the chance of losing that is pushing them here. It's also worth mentioning that this isn't just related to the regional banks, the ones that carry all the 70% of the commercial real estate loans, of which $1 billion plus have to reset over the next 15 months. This is also about the commercial banks, where the biggest money in the United States is rapidly pulling their money out of the commercial banks as well and going directly to treasurydirect.gov would be my guess, or into precious metals, or into things outside the banking system. Because look, if you go directly to the treasury and buy short-term duration treasuries, 6-month treasuries, you're betting on the US government. And if the US government fails, well, the banks are in big trouble, as is right there.